Marshall D. Teach, Blackbeard, the only character in One Piece that manages to send chills down my spine. He's enigmatic, portrayed as an insane yet goofy guy who probably holds more secrets than any other character. But one of those secrets was so huge it shocked both the entire cast of One Piece and the entire community. He became the first person in the history of One Piece to successfully consume 2 devil fruits. Even to this day, the reason behind that has not been officially revealed. People theorize from the moment it happened, but no one knows for sure. Until now. I firmly believe that I managed to bring to light Blackbeard's secret. Before we go into the nitty-gritty, since this whole mystery revolves around devil fruits, I want to quickly explain the basics of a devil fruit so that we're all on the same page. Devil fruits are introduced as mystical fruits that grant superhuman powers to whoever consumes them. The origin of a devil fruit is based on legends, said to be fruits of the sea devil. Confined within each fruit is the spirit of a devil. Once a person consumes the fruit, the devil spirit will be transferred to that person, giving them new powers and abilities, at the cost of rendering them weak against seawater. It is said that only one person can have the power of the same fruit at a time, and a person can only have one devil fruit. A very important thing we learn from Punk Hazard and Dressrosa is that when a devil fruit user dies, his power reincarnates within a nearby fruit. This is important because it clarifies how Blackbeard is able to steal devil fruits. To further explain this, let's go over the first time we saw it happen at the Marineford, when Blackbeard acquired the Gura Gura no Mi Whitebeard's devil fruit. I'll go through the entire process and explain it bit by bit. So, the first thing we saw was Blackbeard's crew finishing Whitebeard off with a volley of bullets. Now this raises a question right off the bat. Is it necessary to kill the user to get the devil fruit? With the information we have now, yes, it seems like the user must be dead. It was not clear in Whitebeard's case, since Blackbeard might have wanted to kill him because he was afraid Whitebeard would have killed them. He was the strongest man alive, let's not forget that. But ever since Marineford, we got a couple of new cases that confirm it. The first one revolves around Absalom, a member of the Gecko Moria's crew that we see during Thriller Bark. He was possessing the Sukesuke no Mi, giving him the ability to turn himself and anything he touches invisible. We learned during the Wano Act 2 that Shiryu killed him and ate his devil fruit, or stole his ability. Now of course, Shiryu being Shiryu would have killed Absalom anyway, but what's important for now is that Absalom is dead. The second case takes place during Dressrosa, when Jesus Burgess tries to kill Sabo in order to obtain his Mera Mera no Mi, then also attempts to do the same thing to Luffy. The idea that the user must be dead is also present in this case. But what's interesting here is that Burgess carries a sack on his back with a specific devil fruit-like pattern. It's not part of neither of his designs, so it must have a purpose. We learn from Punk Hazard that when a devil fruit user dies, the power is transferred to the nearest fruit. When Smiley died, that's what happened. So what I'm going for is that Burgess carried the fruit in his bag, or multiple fruits, as far as we know he could have hunted other users, so that when he killed the user like Sabo for example, the power would inhabit the nearest fruit, the one he's got in his bag. Now some people say the fruit needs to be the same type as the initial devil fruit. So for example, if Whitebeard's devil fruit was an apple, the powers will only transfer to the nearest apple. But whether it's true or not, it doesn't really change anything. Blackbeard could have learned about Whitebeard's fruit appearance in the Devil Fruit Encyclopedia, the book he was so obsessed with, and he prepared that particular fruit for Marineford. Regardless, it doesn't change that much. So far we know how to steal or obtain a devil fruit, and also that the user must be dead for it to work. Keep in mind that there might be other methods to steal a devil fruit, the Big Mom style of eating the user. Some people debate whether or not she ate Mother Caramel, but let's just say she did it for the sake of it, even though it's quite obvious. We have to keep in mind that Big Mom ate her whole, technically storing caramel and her devil fruit inside her. This is different from just grabbing a piece of meat or a slice of heart of someone's body. A regular person wouldn't be able to eat another person of the same size, but this is getting into the weird territory of war, so let's go back to Marineford and move to step 2. Next, they cover Whitebeard with a cloth. I think the reason behind this is far simpler than we want to believe. Some people like to theorize that the cloth was used to create complete darkness to allow Blackbeard to turn into darkness himself, since we know he cannot do so when there's light, and that's how he managed to eat or steal the devil fruit. And sure, it could be true, but I don't think it's that complicated. I firmly believe the cloth was used to hide the process. Doing it in plain sight with thousands of marines and pirates wouldn't be a smart way. At the moment, he is the only one who actively hunts devil fruit users. Imagine what would have happened if everyone saw the process. He wouldn't have this terrifying leverage anymore. As for what happened under the cloth, as soon as Whitebeard died, his power was supposed to travel to another host, another fruit. So Blackbeard had the fruit ready to absorb the Gura Gura no Mi and then he ate it. After the cloth is removed, Whitebeard doesn't look any different, nor does Blackbeard, except of course he now has the Gura Gura no Mi. To summarize, we know for sure that when a Devil Fruit user dies, his power transfers to the nearest fruit. Whether it has to be the same type or not doesn't really matter. We have solid proof on top of everything during Punk Hazard when Smiley died. His powers traveled to the nearest fruit. We also have Burgess during Dressrosa trying to kill Sabo and Luffy to steal their Devil Fruits and store them in a sack, presumably filled with fruits. Then there's Shiryu who killed Absalom and ate his Devil Fruit. If we work backwards toward the Marineford, it becomes pretty clear how Blackbeard stole the Guragura no Mi. Now, this would answer the how did he acquire the Devil Fruit? But the biggest question is how did he know he can eat another Devil Fruit? And let's start by talking about Blackbeard's Devil Fruit. Precisely why did he want this fruit so badly that he desperately hunted it for over 20 years? Some ideas suggest that the Yami Yami no Mi is the reason he can have multiple Devil Fruits, that somehow he used his power to absorb the Guragura no Mi or the explosion provoked by eating 2 Devil Fruits, since Bluno mentions during NES Lobby that eating 2 Devil Fruits would make one's body explode. And fair enough, it could be true, but I highly doubt it, and here's why. Blackbeard stated that he learned about the Yami Yami no Mi from the Devil Fruit Encyclopedia. He thoroughly studied that book and he probably knows more about Devil Fruit than any other character. What this means is that the Yami Yami no Mi had a previous user. Therefore, most information about what this Devil Fruit was capable of was written in the encyclopedia. Sure, it's fair to say that not everyone has access to this book, hence most people wouldn't know that information, but even the Gorosei state that Blackbeard is the first person in the history to have eaten 2 Devil Fruits, and trust me, these guys know a lot of things. And that tells me that the Yami Yami no Mi cannot be used to absorb other Devil Fruits. You got to remember that everyone from the Marineford was in shock when it happened. No one could figure out how did Blackbeard eat another Devil Fruit. Now of course, he may know something that isn't written in the book, but it's a big maybe. Maybe he knew the previous user, maybe he found some piece of secret information, maybe. As I said, his Devil Fruit could be the reason, but there's little information to support this claim. With that being said, why did he want this fruit so badly? Everyone seems to brush aside the fact that this Devil Fruit is essentially the ultimate ability that cancels every other Devil Fruit power. It doesn't matter if it's a Paramecia type, Logia or Zone, it cancels it. It's the ultimate weapon against Devil Fruit users. Now, if Blackbeard knew beforehand that he could store multiple Devil Fruits, then the ability to cancel every other Devil Fruit would really come in handy and be a real priority. But did he know? Something must have made Blackbeard consider the possibility of eating 2 Devil Fruits. Something must have given him the idea that he can eat more than 1 Devil Fruit. And I want to present you a theory that is less based on maybes and more on information already present in the manga. The key is his body. And there's so much proof here. Let's begin with Marco's words on Blackbeard during Marineford. It would be impossible for a normal human to eat 2 Devil Fruits, but you should all know that each is a little different. The very structure of his body is strange. Is that how he pulled this off? Now keep this in mind while we go back to a little scene from Jaya, the first encounter between Blackbeard and the Straw Hats. Well, Nami, Zoro and Luffy to be precise. This is right before they went to Skypedia. Blackbeard has a speech saying that people should believe in their dreams, whatever, that's not the important part. When Zoro and Luffy are about to leave, Nami wonders if Blackbeard could tell them more about the Sky Island, and then asks them, who is he? As in, who is this guy that was talking to you? Luffy says he doesn't know, but corrects Nami by saying it's not he. She's a bit confused, and then Zoro says, it's they, or them, whichever translation you prefer. Nami gets even more confused and assumes Zoro was referring to his possible companions, as in his crew. And a lot of people believe that Zoro and Luffy were referring to Blackbeard's crew. But it doesn't make any sense. Blackbeard is the one who has that speech alone. Nami specifically asks, who is he? Why would they refer to his crew if Nami asked them a simple question? She basically asked, who is the guy you're talking to? It doesn't make any sense for Zoro to reply, no, we're talking to them, his crew. I don't even know why I have to explain this. But anyway, the core thing here is that Zoro and Luffy somehow sense that Blackbeard is more than one person. Now, considering what Marco said about his strange body structure, and that everyone from the Whitebeard Pirates should be aware of that, it pretty much confirms that Blackbeard is more than one person. How many exactly and what does that even mean is something I'll go over in a second. It also confirms that Blackbeard had a strange body prior to eating any Devil Fruit. He's been in Whitebeard's crew for 20 years before he found the Yami Yami no Mi. It's very important that Marco made that remark about Blackbeard's body, because remember, Marco was the doctor of the Whitebeard's Pirates, on top of being the first division commander. After the time skip, he even settles as a doctor at Whitebeard's home village. So it's plausible to say that in 20 years, the time Blackbeard spent in Whitebeard's crew, Marco sensed that something was strange about his body, and as the crew's doctor, checked him to take a closer look. Or maybe Whitebeard sensed something and had Marco checked out. The reason I mention this is because on Sphinx Island, Marco sends Luffy a message through Nekomamushi. It's heavily implied that it's a reveal or warning about Blackbeard. So chapter 982 came out while I was editing this video, and Marco's message was revealed to be something else. I won't spoil it for those of you who are not caught up with the manga, but if you read the chapter you're probably as confused as I am as to why there was a message. But the fact that Marco is now in Wano with Luffy is actually even better. It's likely that at the end of Wano, Marco will have a talk with Luffy about Blackbeard, since we're in the whole Yonko saga. Now back to the main video. Marco knows Luffy's goal, and knows that it will lead to a conflict with Blackbeard. He has extensive history with Blackbeard that could help Luffy in the future. It makes sense for the message to be about Blackbeard. Now back to the question of how many people is Blackbeard. The answer is rather simple. Blackbeard is surrounded by the theme of 3. 3 Jolly Rogers on his flag, 3 guns on his waist, gave Shanks 3 scars, his birthday is the 3rd of August. The more you dig, the more connections you'll find. What this should mean is that he'll only be able to eat a maximum of 3 devil fruits, since he's 3 people. Maybe 1 of each type, perhaps the power have to be compatible, who knows. But 3 devil fruits should be the limit. The last question left is, what exactly does being 3 people means? Basically it means that Blackbeard has 3 containers, each for 1 devil fruit. The reason behind his body structure, if we use in universe logic, could be a consequence of an experiment or something like that. The government does experiments on kids, Caesar used to do them on Punk Hazard, Vegapunk even managed to feed devil fruits to objects. It could be that he had some experiments done on his body during childhood. We know that Judge and Vegapunk worked together and discovered the lineage factor, the blueprint of life itself, which is basically the DNA of our world, and learned that they could manipulate it to change the growth of a life form. Interestingly enough, during the whole King Island arc, we're introduced to modify humans with Germa 66. Sanji's siblings had artificial body enhancements made at a genetic level. They had procedures done on them during their fetus stage. So it's not far-fetched to say that Blackbeard could have been a failed result of a similar experiment. But there is a real-world medical condition that is remarkably similar to what Blackbeard has. I found it to be quite intriguing. When Marco said that Blackbeard's body is strange, he might have been referring to a real-world medical condition called the Taylor-Muhles condition. Considering that Marco was a doctor, he could have diagnosed Blackbeard with this condition. It's a quite famous case, but basically, a woman was pregnant with fraternal twins. At an early stage of the pregnancy, the 2 eggs fused, which left one of the twins carrying her sister's genes in her own body. As a result, it caused Muhil, one of the sisters, to be born with a genetic condition called human chimerism. Muhil has 2 sets of DNA, each with a genetic code to make a separate person. So, if we apply this condition to Blackbeard, it would make sense for him to be able to have 3 devil fruits, since he would have 3 different sets of DNA and essentially be 3 people. I'm not saying Blackbeard has the exact condition that I mentioned, it was just an example to show you how similar he is to a real human chimera, but the core of my point is that he has 3 sets of DNA, which would technically still make him a human chimera, but it all depends on how Oda decides to handle the situation. He might have been born with it, be the result of an experiment, it's really up to Oda. Now before we go any further, there is something crucial that I must address. When someone consumes a devil fruit, where is the devil fruit stored? The conventional idea that circulates the community is that a devil fruit spirit inhabits the user's soul or spirit. But that's wrong. I want to take you back to Punk Hazard, when Trafalgar Law switches the bodies of Smoker and Tashigi. His technique switches the souls or spirits of his targets. So Smoker's soul went into Tashigi's body and Tashigi's to Smoker. What you're going to notice right away is that their personalities and memories were kept intact, but Smoker's devil fruit remained in his original body. Additionally, Frankie and Chopper also switched bodies the same way, and Frankie was able to use Chopper's devil fruit. He couldn't control it, but he could use it. And there's also the thing with objects. We know of certain objects that somehow ate devil fruits. Objects are physical things with no soul or spirit, but they can be viewed as containers. What all of this means is that the devil fruit is connected to the user's physical body and not the soul. Therefore, as long as Blackbeard has 3 sets of DNA, he can store 3 devil fruits in his body. It also ties into the mystery of why Blackbeard doesn't sleep. In chapter 966, during a flashback where Whitebeard's crew fought the Rogers pirates, Buggy tells Shanks that Teach hadn't slept at all during their truce that lasted a few days, then continues and says he heard that he had never slept in his life. Now I want to bring up Cavendish for a bit. Remember him from Dressrosa? The peculiar thing about him is that he possesses an inner personality known as Hakuba, which appears and takes control of his body only when Cavendish falls asleep. Therefore, it seems like Cavendish doesn't sleep, since technically his body is always awake. The thing with Cavendish is that his alter ego is quite distinguishable, both visually and personality-wise, so he became well known in the world of One Piece. But the essential thing here is that Cavendish has an alter ego that takes control of his body when he is asleep. Therefore, his body is always awake. Going back to what I said about Blackbeard being three people, I don't think he has multiple personalities, but it's very possible that he's got something similar going on. When one of them sleeps, the other two are awake. They sleep through a rotation, and that's why he's always awake. It's very hard to be specific with these because of the abnormal world of One Piece, but since Oda already introduced this concept with Cavendish, I'm basing my thought process on that. A common idea that flows around is about something Luffy mentioned back in Drum Island. He said to Sanji that people from snowy regions don't sleep, because if they do, they'll die. And since Oda drew young Blackbeard with snow at his feet and a moon in the background, everyone concluded that Blackbeard is from a snowy island and that's why he doesn't sleep. But it's a very odd conclusion, honestly. While yes, I agree that it's likely he's from a snowy island, seems obvious enough, I completely disagree that's the reason he doesn't sleep. If we were to take Luffy's words seriously, then every single person from a snowy region wouldn't sleep. It would be common knowledge. There are at least 3 winter islands that we know of: the Drum Island, Karakuri Island, and Yukiryu Island. Yet, Oda only emphasized it on Blackbeard. If it wasn't something unique to him, why emphasize it? But anyway, the sleep part is just bonus speculation. The core idea that I'm certain of is that Blackbeard has 3 sets of DNA. As for how did that happen, I'm oscillating between a childhood experiment and something he was born with. Again, it's very hard to be specific with this because it all depends on how Oda wants to handle the situation. But essentially, he's got 3 sets of DNA that act as 3 containers. As a final thing, I want to address the idea that Blackbeard would have eaten a devil fruit, which would allow him to consume multiple devil fruits. There is the popular Cerberus theory, which says that Blackbeard ate the mythical Cerberus fruit and therefore has 3 souls or 3 heads, something like this. But the existence of a Cerberus fruit and its powers are fanfiction. They don't exist. We have no information in the entire manga on the existence of such a fruit. The power that it will allow someone to eat multiple fruits is also fan-made. Now what if Blackbeard ate another devil fruit which would allow him to do a similar thing? Well, don't you think his crewmates would have noticed that he cannot swim? He's been in Whitebeard's crew for 20 years. I think someone would have noticed if Blackbeard steered away from seawater, that if he would manage to keep it hidden. But anyway, these are my thoughts on how does Blackbeard steal devil fruits and why he can eat more than one. This theory could ultimately be proven wrong, of course, but I really have strong faith in it since it makes a lot of sense given the information provided in the manga. I hope you enjoyed it, and let me know what do you think. What are your thoughts on Blackbeard's powers? Thank you for watching.